Wherever they are in the world on September 8th, the members of the Congregation of the Sisters of Charity of the Incarnate Word of Houston sing an old French hymn, Queen of the Waves. The song provides the sisters and all those who co-minister with them an opportunity to pause and remember all who lost their lives in a devastating hurricane a century ago. Striking Galveston on September 8, 1900, the Great Storm is considered the worst natural disaster in the nation's history. More than 6,000 men, women, and children lost their lives. Among the dead were 10 sisters and 90 children from the St. Mary's Orphans Asylum, operated by the Sisters of Charity. The sisters also operated St. Mary's Infirmary in Galveston. It was the first Catholic hospital in the state, established in 1867. The sisters were called to Galveston by Catholic Bishop Claude M. Dubuis in 1866 to care for the many sick and infirm in what was the major port of entry for Texas. They were also charged with caring for orphan children, most of whom had lost parents during yellow fever epidemics. At first, the Sisters of Charity opened an orphanage within the hospital, but later moved it 3 miles to the west on a beachfront property on the former estate of Captain Farnefalia Green. The location seemed ideal as it was far from town and the threat of yellow fever. As Galveston entered the new millennium, it was one of the wealthiest cities per capita in the United States and one of the largest in the state. It was a prosperous community with a bustling port. With a population of 36,000, Galveston appeared to be poised for greatness. And then, one weekend in September in 1900, the same proximity to the sea that had made the community grow and prosper as a port city was to change Galveston Island forever. On September 8th, Galveston became the victim of a powerful hurricane of such destructive force that whole blocks of homes were completely swept away, and 1/6 of the population was killed. Beginning early on the morning of Saturday, September 8th, 1900, the winds began coming in strongly from the north. Despite the opposing winds, the tides of the southern Gulf waters also rose, sending large crashing waves upon the beachfront. Sister Elizabeth Ryan, one of the 10 sisters at St. Mary's Orphanage, had come into town that morning to collect food. Despite pleas from Mother Gabriel, the assistant superior at St. Mary's Infirmary, for her to stay at the hospital until the storm had passed, Sister Elizabeth said she had to return to the orphanage. Sister Elizabeth said that she had provisions in the wagon, and if she did not return, the children would have no supper. She didn't know that whether she returned or not, there would be no more suppers at the orphanage. During the afternoon, the winds and rain continued to increase. The tides of the Gulf rose higher and higher, with fierce waves crashing on the beach, sending floodwaters into the residential areas. St. Mary's Orphanage consisted of 2 large 2-story dormitories just off the beach behind a row of tall sand dunes that were supported by salt cedar trees. The buildings had balconies facing the Gulf. According to one of the boys at the orphanage, the rising tides began eroding the sand dunes as though they were made of flour. Soon the waters of the Gulf reached the dormitories. The sisters at the orphanage brought all the children into the girls' dormitory because it was the newer and stronger of the two. In the first-floor chapel, they tried to calm the children by having them sing Queen of the Waves. The waters continued to rise. Taking the children to the second story of the dormitory, the sisters had Henry Esquiter, a worker, collect clothesline rope. Again, they had the boys and girls sing Queen of the Waves. One of the boys later said that the children were very frightened and the sisters were very brave. By 6 p.m., the wind was gusting past 100 miles per hour, and the waters of the Gulf and Bay had met, completely flooding the city. Residents climbed to the second stories, attics, and even roofs of their homes. Flying debris struck many who dared venture outside their homes. Around 7:30 p.m., the main tidal surge struck the southern shore. Houses along the beachfront were lifted from their foundations and sent like battering rams into other houses. Houses fell upon houses. At St. Mary's Infirmary, the floodwaters filled the first floor. From the second-story balcony, the sisters pulled refugees in as they floated by and brought them into the overcrowded hospital. Almost every window in the facility was broken out, sending the wind and rain whipping through the building. At the orphanage, the children and sisters heard the crash of the boys' dormitory as it collapsed and was carried away by the floodwaters. The sisters cut the clothesline rope into sections and used it to tie the children to the cinctures which they wore around their waists. Each sister tied herself to between 6 to 8 children. It was a valiant yet sacrificial effort to save the children. Some of the older children climbed onto the roof of the orphanage. Eventually, the dormitory building that had been sanctuary for the children and sisters was lifted from its foundation. The bottom fell out and the roof came crashing down, trapping those inside. Only 3 boys from the orphanage survived: William Murney, Frank Madera, and Albert Campbell. Miraculously, all 3 ended up together in a tree in the water. After floating for more than a day, they were eventually able to make their way into town, where they told the sisters what had happened at the orphanage. One of the boys remembered a sister tightly holding 2 small children in her arms, promising not to let go. The sisters were buried wherever they were found, with the children still attached to them. 2 of the sisters were found together across the bay on the mainland. One of them was tightly holding 2 small children in her arms. Even in death, she had kept her promise not to let go. The death and destruction in Galveston was unbelievable. More than 6,000 were dead, and their bodies were littered throughout the city. It would be months before some would be uncovered. A complete list of the dead was never made. It is estimated that the winds reached 150 miles per hour, or maybe even 200. The tidal surge has been estimated from 15 to 20 feet. Whole blocks of homes had been completely destroyed, leaving little more than a brick or 2. In all, more than 3,600 homes had been destroyed. A great wall of debris wrapped itself around St. Mary's Infirmary on the eastern end of the city and then zigzagged through the city to the beach. At places, the wall was 2 stories tall. Inside this great wall were destroyed houses, pieces of furniture, pots, pans, cats, dogs, and people. Those who were dead and those who were dying. At St. Mary's Infirmary, there was no food or water. While the main hospital building was still standing, the adjacent structures had been destroyed. The hospital was packed with those who were injured and those who had nowhere else to go. 2 of the sisters walked about the area until they found crackers and cookies that had been soaked in the water. They brought them back to the hospital, and over a fire they built in the street, they dried the food and served it to those in need at the infirmary. Firmly committed to the healing ministry of Jesus Christ, the sisters repaired St. Mary's Infirmary and 1 year later opened a new orphanage. Today, the sisters have extended their ministry to other states and foreign countries. On September 8, 1994, a Texas historical marker was placed at 69th Street and Seawall Boulevard, marking the site of the former orphanage. The descendants of 2 of the survivors, Will Murney and Frank Madera, returned to participate in the marker dedication. As part of the ceremony, Queen of the Waves was sung again at the same time and place as it was during the great 1900 storm, and as it continues to be each September 8th by the Sisters of Charity of the Incarnate Word.
Queen of the waves, look forth across the ocean, from north to south, from east to stormy west. See how the waters with tumultuous motion